Well, hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Mitali Gupta, and I'm an innovator and strategist at a startup based out of Berlin. In addition, I am honored to partner with Hub Network to lead this session of Impact State of Mind on behalf of Impact Hub New York Metropolitan Area. For a little bit of context, Impact Hub New York Metropolitan Area is a nonprofit supporting entrepreneurs and change makers through programs designed to help impactful ideas succeed. We work across the New York Metro broadly and are part of a global association of entrepreneurial communities in more than 100 cities and across 50 countries. Impact State of Mind is a virtual series created to support innovators and connect the impact community. These sessions are a way for entrepreneurs to connect digitally and internationally on topics that are at the social. So we're so excited today and honored to have Hannah Rudin online with us today. Hannah is a Seattle-based human-centered design strategist, researcher, and experienced designer with a passion for civic design. Hannah did her master's thesis focused on applying design and team-building practices to social and political polarization in America at the School of Visual Arts in New York. She has continued to work as an experienced designer and researcher at organizations such as the Rockefeller Foundation, New America, the New Museum, UNESCO Futures Literacy, and others. In early 2020, Hannah also began working with AIGA Seattle, Seattle's local design community, to launch a new civic design initiative, which is what she's here to share with us today. And we're so excited to hear more about that. Hannah currently works as a strategist at Smashing Ideas. So thank you so much for joining us today, Hannah. It's a true privilege to have you online today. We'd love to kick this off by hearing about your work dedicated to civic design. So tell us a little bit about AIGA, the design community, the vision, and just the overall goals as they relate to the SDGs.
Yeah, thank you for hosting me, Vitali. This is really exciting. So so I have been working with AIGA Seattle and to launch a civic design initiative that is local to Seattle. This started with AIGA nationally has something called their Design for Democracy initiative. And in early 2020, in Seattle's local chapter, no one was directing the Design for Democracy initiative. And so I was looking for a way to get involved and offered to spearhead that. And quickly sort of came to the realization that Design for Democracy with AIGA was very much geared toward voting and engaging voters and using design to craft communications and posters to encourage people to vote. And I was looking to do something with the initiative that was a little bit broader than that, a little bit thinking more broadly about what civic and community engagement could be and what I think it should be. Looking to engage more types of designers and more people. And so working with a small group, we pivoted, evolved into what we're now calling the Civic Design Initiative. And this relates to one of the Sustainable Development Goals, because it's really about community-based solutions, community-based organizations, and strengthening our communities and institutions through design. I'm a big evangelist for design, and so that's really what the goal is to create the bridge or the intersection between designers and the creative community on one side, and then local civic and community-based organizations on the other side, and watch the magic happen from there, and use this to build a lot of community power and resiliency, and help things work better for more people is really the big idea behind it.
Sounds great. And maybe you can help us with, according to you, what does civic design mean? How would you define that being in this field, working on this project? What is it? What are the key, maybe one or two things that define civic design?
Yeah, good question. So we were wondering the same thing, actually. We at the start, so I'm working on this project with a few teammates, and at the start we were like, we need to come up with a definition for civic design for ourselves and that we can share with others. And there's a lot of definitions floating around out there. And so we came up with one for ourselves based on other definitions, which is civic design. Here, I pulled it up, but civic design is leveraging a design mentality to dismantle dysfunctional inherited systems and build new ones that support and grow the communities they are meant to serve. And so we characterize the design mentality by, the design mentality is characterized by creativity, optimism, dedication to users, use of prototyping, a basis of problem scoping, embrace of complexity, and ownership of consequences. And those are sort of seven characteristics that we see in design, that we see that makes design powerful, and a powerful way of thinking. And that's what we want to apply into civic spaces and community spaces, in order to dismantle dysfunctional inherited systems and support new ones. And so that differs a little bit from other definitions for civic design that you might find out there, which again mostly seem to center on voter engagement or like civic engagement through voting, and we were like, civics is more than that. Like citizenship is more than that. And so so we were looking to but the term civic design still applied. So we came up with a new definition to support our work there.
Maybe can you talk us through an example of a project where you're utilizing this design in the project and how we see it play out in real life, and also talk about a little bit about your passion that led you to this work and why this work specifically?
Yeah, okay. So I'll do that in reverse order. So I started this started with my master's thesis work, which started in basically the spring of 2018. And so I was at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, in the Products of Design program. And we were trying to come up with thesis projects, and it was like, given 1 year to do anything, like to commit yourself to anything, like how do you decide what to do? And so I did a little bit of, I don't know, deep thinking, and realized, surprising myself a little bit, that I was most interested in social and political polarization in America. And I think that, I mean, that was kind of a surprise to me. I hadn't been like super interested in politics or civics at all before then. And I don't know if anyone else around me would have really expected that either. But that was the thing that like I felt like I needed to do for my master's thesis. And so through that process, I interviewed a whole lot of people who in different ways apply design to public policy or to community engagement or community building or just like infrastructure. and was really inspired by all of those people, and just found like a whole new world of possibilities that for design that I hadn't considered before. And yeah, and realized that that's really like the thing that inspires me, that I would love to do. Um, Moving to Seattle, so New York has a really amazing civic design scene. There's a lot of civic design work going on, like through the mayor's office and outside of the mayor's office, with a lot of like contractors um, and nonprofits. Like quick shout out to Public Policy Lab, for example, who is one of the groups inspiring me. But Seattle doesn't have as much of a civic design scene, and so getting here and discovering that, I really wanted to help grow that and fix that, and see AIGA, the design community, as a really good place to start doing that. And yeah, and going from what I already have. One example of how I've done it also in the past year is through another project that I work on, called Seattle Happy Places, which started with the Seattle Design Fest last summer. And we went through like a human-centered design process. My partner on the project and I went through like a human-centered design process to figure out how to what was a way that we could I guess like give people help people find, like, do some placemaking, and find like peace and joy in the early months of COVID, through places around their community. And so that was like a combination of like human-centered design, and then branding, and community engagement, experience design, that produced Seattle Happy Places, which will be has been going on for this past year, and we'll be back in the Seattle Design Fest this summer.
That makes sense. And you mentioned that you saw this design and civic design community in New York, which was lacking in Seattle. Why do you think that is, that certain cities are placing a little bit more emphasis towards it? What is lacking in other cities, and what's that gap that will make up to do this very important work?
Yeah, great question. So from having like interviewed people who are working in this space or adjacent to the space, there's a lot of it's a combination of, I mean, a lot of things, as you might expect. But what I've gathered is that there's more and more places who are open to it, who are open to this idea of human-centered design, and what design can do beyond graphic design and communications. It feels risky. It feels risky, and it feels, yeah, new, and so a lot of like institutions that have been institutions for quite a long time, they're not quite ready to take the risk. And so and that's part of what we're trying to address with this initiative, is how can we make the risk of human-centered design, of this kind of funky newish thing, feel less risky. I think it feels risky because human-centered design in a lot of ways involves like slowing down and doing more upstream work, that is not just, you know, getting like approvals for things. In order to like see better results with downstream work, and it also involves talking to more people, engaging with more people in the communities, and it's not always easy for like super large organizations and institutions to do that, or there's people who don't feel like that's an important thing to do. And so I think that in New York, civic design has a lot of champions. It has a lot of people who are willing to champion it and like, you know, help take on the risk, I suppose. And then it's seen a lot of success with that. And now it has like more and more buy-in for it. Whereas Seattle is still on like the newer end of figuring out what design is, what design can do. And there's places in the city where it's happening, but there's places that still need to like find those champions who are willing to be like, we need this, we need to like start using this in our institution.
That makes a ton of sense. And that's why we have champions like you, I think, driving and taking inspiration of this design from New York and bringing it to other communities. Maybe you can talk us through more of similar challenges that you have faced at this time, you know, being an entrepreneur, doing this kind of community work, rolling out these civic design initiatives. We'd love to hear kind of what hurdles have you come through and how are you tackling them, or how have you already tackled them?
Yeah. This whole process has been a lot of myself and my teammates being like, okay, like we need to give ourselves a lot of grace. We need to there's a lot of so much new stuff going on, so many things like happening in the world very quickly, and so it's not going to feel like a linear project that we can charge forward with, is what we've been telling ourselves and what we've been feeling. And so like COVID has been a barrier. I mean, this project's like started during COVID and has continued through COVID, but at the same time that we've all been kind of figuring out how COVID works and what people are willing to, you know, can commit to and what they can't commit to. At the start of COVID, for like, it seemed like everyone was on webinars, on Zoom all the time, just experiencing all these things. And now like that's tapered off a lot. Or people are like are trying to do different things, and so just like figuring out like what the waves of that changes. Not only that, but AIGA in Seattle and nationally has been going through a reckoning with racial justice that has been very important for them to do and for us to do. And so we've been trying to figure out like how our initiative needs to reflect and respond to that. And so for a while, it felt like a good time for us to take a step back and not do anything public facing. And now we're starting to think about doing more public facing things again. And then just for myself, like I am someone who works on too many things all the time. And so just burn out and just figuring out like what are the projects that I need to commit myself to? What are the projects that I need to back away from? This is a project that I really feel like I need to commit myself to. But yeah, I'm at an early stage in a lot of things, and it's it feels like I should be saying yes to everything. I think because of that, because every opportunity is a really good one for me. And but at the same time, I need to actually make sure I'm committing myself to the babies I'm trying to grow.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think burnout and just having too many things going on is something that we can all relate to, especially coming out of this year in the pandemic. So going off of that, how do you think people can, support you or get involved in your work that are interested in these spaces? What do you need from the community that is missing today? And how can people feel that they are involved and making an impact without having this this thing about burnout, or this thing about like, oh, there's too much going on, getting to them?
Yeah. So for this work, anyone interested, like we would love to hear from you. We'd love to know like what questions you have that that then like we can go out and try and answer, and how you would like to be involved in the future. Like we have so the initiative, we're working on 3 different sort of like core program areas. One is just putting out content about civic design and helping people learn what they want to learn about it, since we found it's pretty scattered across the internet and across people's minds, and we want to like bring that together and help people just learn more about what civic design is and what is going on out there and what the possibilities are, how they can get involved. So that's one, content. The second one is events. We are working on setting up some like speakers or panels for the summer. We want all of our events to be participatory, so they'll all have like a workshop element to it while we're learning from really interesting people in the community. And so if you're interested, or you know someone who might be a good person to get involved with an event, definitely would love to hear about that. And then the last like core area that we're working on is a civic design fellowship for the fall, where we are interested in people who have noticed very tangible problems in their communities. This is local to Seattle, but yeah, very tangible problems in their communities. And then we're creating like a launch pad, getting them from problem to the next stage, whatever the next stage is. Not all the way to solution, but all the way to proposal, or launching into the next stage that they need to launch into. And so that'll be a fellowship program for the fall. And then broader than Seattle, I think that we're interested in connecting with like other organizations who have done similar programs, who might be interested in doing this work. We're interested in sponsors for the fellowship in particular, and also to make sure that we're able to pay for speakers and interesting people to come do events, and compensating people, and yeah, advisors and consultants, and there's a lot of possibility right now. So we would love to hear from you.
Thank you so much for sharing all those opportunities. And I would really like to encourage our participants, if this is an area that is of interest, please definitely do reach out to Hannah. She's very kind to make herself available to answer your questions. Is there anything else you would like to highlight to the community in terms of any other projects in relation to civic design that you are working on or are excited to be working
on? Yeah, well, I mean, I want to make sure I'm highlighting my collaborators on the project, Jess Hord and Kate Gunther, and Hannah Byrne and Gilly Mizrahi, like who are our new team members, and then all of our advisors on this project and supporters so far. And then yeah, and then I'm also working on another civic design project right now. I consider it civic design, with Lisa K. Solomon from the Stanford D School, around bringing education on how to citizen, how to be a citizen and teammate to athletes, varsity athletes at colleges across the country, and thinking about how we can incorporate this civic engagement, community engagement, education into what coaches already teach their athletes, and teach their athletes about the type of teammates, how to be better teammates. We're asking how to be citizens athletes. And so that's another project that I'm excited to be working on right now. So maybe next time I talk to you, it'll be about that.
Perfect. That sounds great. I know we're coming up towards the end of the session, so I just want to take some audience questions. So somebody has asked us, even though New York may be more advanced in terms of civic engagement, what might New York institutions or communities learn from your experience in Seattle?
I think that a big one is that there's, in Seattle, and I think also New York, there's a design community that is so full of good intentions, like really wants to make sure they're doing good things in the world, and like has this enormous design skill set, and like isn't always sure where to go with it, and like even is interested in communities and civics, and is sort of not seeing the bridge there, not seeing like the direct pathway to getting their skills involved, especially if you are not a graphic designer or like communications designer. There's a lot of channels usually for like graphic designers, not as many for designers like me, who my primary area is not graphic design. And so I think in New York, design communities or creative communities in particular can help designers by finding those pathways, and like putting them right there. And you at the tech companies, this is how you can do it. Like, come over here. We want you over here. And I think that that's one of the things we're trying to do in Seattle, in addition to just like evangelizing design, and in places where it isn't already as embraced, so that those places, just like recognizing that there's this risk factor, that design can feel risky, and how can we make it feel less risky to places who could benefit from it.
Thank you. And just one last question before we wrap it up. Which city do you think could benefit most from the design principles that you're working on? And how do you think that could impact the day-to-day life of everyone there, or just promote this UN SDG of building more sustainable cities and communities?
I don't know which city specifically. I mean, having not been to most cities in the US, I've been to some, but I can't speak as an expert on cities. However, I will say my dream job would be to travel around the country doing facilitating sort of like futures thinking or civic design workshops at small towns around the country, small towns and cities around the country. And the goal overall being of helping those communities find ways of building, of empowering each other, and having the tools to think through these future scenarios and then create them. I think it's like a slant answer to that question, but that was the first thing I think of.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Hannah, for joining us today and for sharing all of this great knowledge around design and around community and civic sense. It was super insightful, and we also loved hearing of the opportunities that we could get potentially involved with. To the audience, thank you again for your time. If you have any more questions, please feel free to write us at newyork@impacthub.net. And we very much hope to see you at our next session.